After the humiliating loss during the First World War and the scuttling of the High Seas Fleet at Scapa Flow, the German Navy, or the Reichsmarine, was reduced to rubble. The Treaty of Versailles would force Germany and other Central Powers to take all the blame for World War I. This would mean all loss of territories, reduction in military forces, and reparation payments to Allied powers. But all this would plant the seeds of what would become the Second World War, which would break out 20 years later when Nazi Germany invaded Poland. The treaty would affect the German Navy hard for the post-war years to come. For a better understanding of what this entailed, check out either my video on the Königsberg-class, which were the predecessors of today's subject, or check out Important History's video on the Königsberg, which is linked down in the description. The Washington Naval Treaty, which was signed into service in February of 1922, would lead to weighing down the German Navy even more, and would ultimately lead to Germany designing and building two classes of light cruisers that would fit within the limits of the Washington Naval Treaty. For the first of these classes would end up being known as the K-class, or more recognizably known as the Königsberg-class that I had mentioned previously, and consisted of three ships: the Königsberg, the Karlsruhe, and the Kolin. The second of these two designs, and the topic of our video today, would be known as the Leipzig-Class, and consisted of two ships, the Leipzig and the Nürnberg. In this video, we'll be delving into the design and service history of the Leipzig-Class. But before we dive into these two cruisers, if you are new to the channel and have not done so yet, please hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss out on any of the future content. The two ships of the Leipzig-class were not identical, prompting some naval historians to classify them as separate designs, rather than as a ship class. Of the two, Nürnberg was larger. Leipzig was 165.8 meters long at the waterline and 177 meters long overall. She had a beam of 16.6 meters and a maximum draft of 5.69 meters forward. She displays 6,820 metric tons as designed, and 8,100 metric tons at full load. Nürnberg was slightly longer, at 170 meters at the waterline, and 181.3 meters overall. Her beam was identical to Leipzig, but her draft was slightly larger, at 5.74 meters forward. Her displacement was 8,060 metric tons, and designed, and 9,040 metric tons fully loaded. The ship's hulls were divided into 14 watertight compartments and had a double bottom that ran for 83% of the length of their keels. Both vessels had side bulges and bullnose bows. They were constructed with longitudinal steel frames and were more than 90% welded in order to save weight. Nürnberg had a large, blocky forward superstructure, while Leipzig's forward superstructure resembled that of the preceding Königsberg-class. Nürnberg also had a large searchlight platform fitted on the funnel, while Leipzig did not. Leipzig initially had a crew of 26 officers and 508 enlisted men. Later in her career, the crew grew to 30 officers and 628 enlisted sailors, and then again to 24 officers and 826 enlisted sailors. She could also accommodate an admiral's staff of 6 officers and 20 enlisted men when she was serving as a flagship. Nürnberg's crew started as 25 officers and 648 enlisted sailors, and over the course of her career swelled to 26 officers and 870 enlisted sailors. The ships carried 2 picket boats, 2 barges, 2 launches, and 2 cutters. Both ships carried 1 aircraft catapult for a pair of Henklin HE or He 60 biplane reconnaissance float planes. They were equipped with a crane to retrieve the aircraft after landing. The HE-60s were later replaced by the Mono Aero AR-196 by 1939. Leipzig's catapult was located between the funnel and the forward superstructure, while Nürnberg's was placed aft of the funnel. The ship's propulsion system consisted of 2 steam turbines manufactured by the Duchy Werke and German Wharft shipyards, along with 4 7-cylinder double-action 2-stroke diesel engines built by MAN, or MAN. Steam for the turbines was provided by 6 marine-type double-ended oil-fired water tube boilers, which were vented through a single large funnel located amidships. This was an upgrade from the Königsberg-class, which would be 2 funnels instead of 1 large funnel. The engines were rated at 60,000 shaft horsepower for the turbines plus 12,400 ship horsepower for the central diesel engines. The ship's propulsion systems provided a top speed of 32 knots and a range of approximately 3,900 miles or nautical miles at 10 knots, using only the diesel engines. With only the turbines in operation, the ships could steam for 2,800 nautical miles at a speed of 16.5 knots. The ships had extensive electrical generator systems. Leipzig had 3 power plants that each had a 180 kilowatt turbo generator and a 180 kilowatt diesel generator. This gave the ship a combined output of 1,080 kilowatts at 220 volts. Nürnberg had 4 generators, which comprised of 2 30 kilowatt turbo generators and 2 350 kilowatt diesel generators, for a total output of 1,013 or 1,300 kilowatts, also at 220 volts. Steering was controlled by a single batched rudder, which gave the ship's excellent maneuverability. The rudder was augmented with a special steering system on the engine transmissions. They had gears that could provide half of the engines astern and half forward, allowed the screws to assist in turning the ship at sharper angles. The ships tended towards lee helm in general conditions, but in heavy wind they suffered from weather helm. Both vessels also suffered from severe leeway at slow speeds, and the effect was especially pronounced for Nürnberg owing to her large superstructure. Leipzig and Nürnberg were armed with a main battery of 9 15-centimeter or 5.9 inches or 9-inch SK-C-25 guns, same armament that the Königsbergs had, mounted in 3 triple gun turrets. 1 was located forward, and 2 were placed in a super-firing pair aft, all on the center line. They were supplied with between 1,080 and 1,500 rounds of ammunition, for between 120 and 166 shells per gun. As built, Leipzig was also equipped with 2 8.8-centimeter or 3.5-inch SK-L-45 anti-aircraft guns in single mounts. They had 800 rounds of ammunition. Nürnberg, meanwhile, was built with 8 of those weapons, with 320 rounds in total, or 3,200 rounds in total. Nürnberg also carried 8 3.7-centimeter or 1.5-inch SK-C-30 anti-aircraft guns and several 2-centimeter or 0.79-inch anti-aircraft guns, though the number of the latter changed over her career. The 2 ships also carried 4 triple torpedo tube mounts located midships. Leipzig had 50-centimeter or 20-inch weapons, while Nürnberg was equipped with 53.3-centimeter 21-inch torpedoes. They were supplied with 24 torpedoes. They were also capable of carrying 120 naval mines. Leipzig used Krupp cemented armor, while Nürnberg received the newly developed wonton heart steel. The ships were protected by an armored deck that was 30 millimeters or 1.2 inches thick amidships, and an armor belt that was 50 millimeters or 2 inches thick. The belt was inclined to a greater degree than in the preceding Königsbergs. To increase the effectiveness of the same thickness of armor plate, the sloping armor that connected the deck with the belt was 25 millimeters or 0.98 inches thick. The conning tower had 100 millimeters or 3.9 inch thick sides with a 50 millimeter thick roof. The gun turrets had 80 millimeters or 3.1 inch thick faces, or 35 millimeter 1.4 inch thick sides, and 32 millimeter or 1.3 inch thick roofs. They were mounted on barbettes that were protected with 60 millimeters or 2.4 inches of steel plating. After the outbreak of war, both ships were fitted with a distinguishing coil to protect them against mechanic mines. Leipzig had her aircraft equipment removed in 1941, along with her after torpedo tubes. In 1942, Nürnberg's aircraft handling equipment and aft torpedo tubes were also removed. Throughout the war, the ship's radar situs were upgraded. In March of 1941, Nürnberg was equipped with FUMO, or FUMO, 21 radar, and in early 1942, a FUMO 25 radar set was installed. The latter was a search radar for service targets and low-flying aircraft at low range. The FUMO 21 set was replaced by the short-range FUMO 63 Hottent 50-centimeter radar. Nürnberg was also fitted with 4 Metox radar warning receivers. Leipzig did not receive her Fumo 24 or 25 radar set until 1943. This was to be the last modification for the Leipzig. Leipzig had her anti-aircraft armament modernized to bring her closer to the standard of weaponry fitted to her sister. In 1934, two additional 8.8 centimeter guns were added, with another pair later. Starting in 1941, 8 3.7 centimeter guns were installed, along with 14 2 centimeter guns. After 1944, she only carried 8 of the 2 centimeter guns. Nürnberg's anti-aircraft battery was improved over the course of World War II. In late 1942, a pair of Army variant 2 centimeter, excuse me if I say this wrong, but Flocker veiling quadruple mounts were installed. One on the navigating bridge, and the other on the top of the aft super-firing turret. In May of 1944, the Navy proposed installing several Bofors at 40mm or 1.6 inch guns. But most of these weapons were diverted to other uses, and only 2 guns were installed. One was mounted on the bridge, and the other were the catapult that had been located. 2 Navy pattern Falklings were added. One replaced the Army model atop the aft superfiring turret, and the other was placed in front of the anti-aircraft fire director. The Army pattern Falklings were moved to the main deck in December of 1944. Other revised anti-aircraft plans were proposed, this time incorporating the new 3.7 centimeter flak 30 or 43 gun, of which there were to be 8, along with 2 Flockerlings or Verlings and 10 2 centimeter twin mounts. Germany's wartime situation by the end of 1944 prevented these changes from being made, however. Leipzig was laid down at the Reichsmarine Wharf shipyard in Wilhelmshaven on the 28th of April, 1928, and launched on the 18th of October, 1929. She was commissioned into the Kriegsmarine on the 8th of October, 1931. The ship trained extensively in the Baltic Sea throughout 1932 and 1933, and also made several goodwill cruises overseas. In 1934, she and the cruiser Königsberg made the first goodwill visit to the United Kingdom since the end of World War I. In late 1934, Leipzig went into dry dock for modifications. An aircraft catapult was installed on the aft superstructure, and a crane for handling the floatplanes replaced one of her boat barracks. The original single-mount 8.8 centimeter anti-aircraft guns were replaced with twin mounts. These modifications were made in Kiel. In early 1935, Leipzig joined the old pre-dreadnought battleship Schiedel, the new heavy cruiser Deutschland, and the light cruiser Kolin for major fleet exercises. Later in 1935, Adolf Hitler visited the ship during training maneuvers with the rest of the fleet. The ship joined her sister ship Nürnberg and the other light cruiser Kolin for exercises in the Atlantic Ocean in early 1936. In August, Leipzig took part in the non-intervention patrols off Spain during the Spanish Civil War. She conducted several patrols between August of 1936 and June of 1937. and in late June, she was allegedly attacked with torpedoes. This prompted Germany and Italy to withdraw from non-intervention patrols. She thereafter returned to Germany and went into the Baltic Sea for training, which lasted through 1938. In March of 1939, she participated in the annexation of Memel, which Germany had demanded from Lithuania. The following month, she joined the battleship Gneisenau and the heavy cruiser Deutschland, and several destroyers and U-boats for major exercises in the Atlantic. Additional maneuvers were conducted through the middle of 1939. At the outbreak of World War II, in September of 1939, Leipzig was assigned to the blockading force that was intended to prevent the escape of the Polish Navy from the Baltic. They were unsuccessful in this endeavor, however. Leipzig thereafter went to the North Sea, where she and the other light cruisers laid a series of defensive minefields. This task lasted through the end of the month, after which she returned to the Baltic for training maneuvers. On the 17th through the 19th of November, Leipzig covered a mine-laying operation in the North Sea. She joined the heavy cruiser Deutschland, the light cruiser Colon, and 3 torpedo boats sent for a sweep in the Scharlach for Allied shipping on the 21st through the 22nd of November. Leipzig was tasked with escorting the battleships Scharnhorst and Gneisenau through the Scharlach, and with covering their return on the 27th. On the 13th of December, Leipzig was tasked with escorting a flotilla of destroyers and other small vessels as they proceeded through the Scharlach to laying a minefield. While en route, the British submarine HMS Salmon attacked the German warships, and at 11:25, a torpedo hit Leipzig. The torpedo blew a hole just below the waterline, where a bulkhead separated 2 of the ship's 3 boiler rooms. The explosion bent her armored deck and damaged her keel. Some 1,700 tons of water flooded the ship, and the damage cut electrical power to the ship's pumping system. The 2 boiler rooms were flooded, steam lines were damaged, and the port turbine was shut down. At around the same time, her sister Nürnberg was also torpedoed. A pair of destroyers arrived to escort the damaged cruisers back to port. An hour after Leipzig was torpedoed, one of the escorting destroyers was also torpedoed, just outside the mouth of the Elbe. Another torpedo passed just ahead of Leipzig, nearly hitting the damaged cruiser. While en route back to Germany on the 14th of December, Nürnberg and Leipzig came under attack from the British Royal Air Force, or RAF. Approximately 20 Vickers Wellington bombers from the number 99th Squadron was intercepted by fighters from the 2nd Group of JG-77 Fighter Wing, under the leadership of Karl Alfred Schumcher, in the vicinity of the Scharlach, or the Spin Group, and the Wen Group. The RAF bombers failed to further damage the cruisers, as JG-77 pilots claimed 7 and 1 probable bomber shot down, including one claimed by Herbert Kudstra. RAF records indicate that 6 bombers were lost in the attack, after safely returning to port in Kiel. Leipzig was taken into the Duchy Work shipyard for repairs. She was decommissioned while under repair and reclassified as a training ship. To accommodate additional training crews, 4 of the ship's boilers were removed. She returned to service in late 1940. In early 1941, she escorted the heavy cruiser Lutzow, formerly the Deutschland, to Norway. After she returned to the Baltic, she and the cruiser Emden provided artillery support to advancing German ground forces during Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union. In September, she supported the invasion of the Baltic Islands in the West Enthian archipelago. While bombarding Soviet positions on Moon Island, Leipzig was attacked unsuccessfully by the Soviet submarine SHCH-317. In late September, the ship joined the German Baltic Fleet, centered on the battleship Tirpitz. The fleet was tasked with blocking a possible Soviet attempt to break out of the Baltic. Leipzig returned to Kiel in October and conducted maneuvers with the heavy cruiser Admiral Scheer. Leipzig became the flagship of the training fleet in 1942. She spent the year performing training duties. Leipzig was decommissioned briefly in March of 1943 and recommissioned on the 1st of August. She was in need of an overhaul, however, and the work significantly delayed her return to operational status. Furthermore, an outbreak of meningitis killed 2 crewmen and created an additional delay. Leipzig returned to escort duties in the Baltic in mid-September 1944. Her first operation was to cover troop transports between Goldhaven and Schwimdut in company with the Admiral Scheer. On the 14th of October, Leipzig departed Goldhaven, bound for Schwimdut, to take on a load of mines. In a heavy fog, she collided with the heavy cruiser Prinz Eugen, which was steaming at 20 knots. At the time of collision, Leipzig was switching from her diesel cruise engines to her steam turbine main engines, a process of first uncoupling the diesels from the shafts and then coupling turbines to the shafts, which left the ship temporarily without propulsion, drifting out of her fairway into the path of Prinz Eugen, which was moving in the opposite direction. Prinz Eugen struck Leipzig on her port side, just forward of her funnel, cutting her nearly in half. The forward point of the clipper bow of Prinz Eugen actually stuck out beyond the starboard side of Leipzig. The collision destroyed the number 3 or port side engine room, flooding a second engine room, and killed or wounded 39 crewmen. The ships remained stuck fast for over a day, after which Leipzig was towed back to Goldhaven. The damage was so severe that repairs were deemed impractical, especially considering Germany's pressing military situation by late 1944. Only repairs to keep her afloat in the harbor were effected. Leipzig provided fire support to the defending German forces in March of 1945, while Soviet Red Army forces advanced on the city. On the 24th of March, Leipzig was moved to Halle, laden with refugees. She was capable of steaming at only 6 knots. She was repeatedly attacked by Soviet aircraft, and Allied submarines attempted to torpedo her twice. She nevertheless safely reached Denmark on the 29th of April. Due to her poor state following the end of the war, she was used as a barracks ship for the men of the German Minesweeping Administration, tasked with clearing mines off the German coast. The battered ship was eventually towed out and scuttled in July of 1946. Nürnberg was laid down in 1934 at the Duchy Werk shipyard in Kiel. She was launched on the 6th of December, 1934, and completed in less than a year, being commissioned on the 2nd of November, 1935. The ship thereafter worked up in the Baltic Sea until April of 1936, when she joined Cologne and Leipzig for a training cruise into the Atlantic. At this time, she was made the flagship of the reconnaissance forces of the German Navy. The three cruisers then returned to the Baltic for additional maneuvers. Nürnberg participated in the non-intervention patrols during the Spanish Civil War of 1936 through 1939. On her initial deployment in 1936, she flew the flag of Admiral Hermann Bohlen. Over the course of the conflict, Nürnberg conducted 4 patrols off Spain, but did not encounter any belligerent forces. With the exception of a claimed attack by a unidentified submarine south of the Barkent Islands on the 16th of July, 1937. In September 1937, Nürnberg took part in fleet maneuvers with the heavy cruisers Admiral Graf Spee and Deutschland, the light cruisers Leipzig and Karlsruhe, and several destroyers. The first 3 months of 1938 were spent in the Baltic, after which Nürnberg went to dry dock for a periodic refit. In June, she went out on a training cruise to Norway and returned to Germany the following month. In August, she was present at the Fleet Review held by Kiel for Adolf Hitler and the visiting regent of Hungary, Miklos Horthy. Nürnberg joined the fleet that was sent to Memel in March of 1939 to seize the region. After completing the occupation, Nürnberg joined the Admiral Graf Spee, Leipzig, and Cologne for a training cruise to the Mediterranean Sea, which included several stops in Spanish ports. After returning to Germany in May, she resumed training in the Baltic. At the outbreak of World War II, on the 1st of September 1939, Nürnberg was assigned to the blockade force that was intended to prevent the Polish Navy from escaping from the Baltic. Despite the Germans' effort, several Polish destroyers and submarines escaped to Britain, where they continued the war. On the 3rd of September, Nürnberg and the rest of the cruisers were withdrawn to the North Sea to lay a series of defensive minefields to protect the German coastline. She returned to the Baltic for training exercises in October. The following month, she was transferred back to the North Sea, where she was tasked with escorting destroyers laying minefields off the British coast. On the 4th through the 6th of December, the ship conducted a mining operation off at Kristiansand, Norway. On the 13th of December, while escorting a group of destroyers returning from a mine-laying operation off the British coast, the Royal Navy submarine, HMS Salmon, launched a spread of torpedoes at the German flotilla. 2 torpedo tracks were spotted ahead towards Nürnberg, and the ship turned hard to port in an attempt to evade them. One passed harmlessly ahead of the ship, but the second struck her in the bow. Nürnberg reduced speed to 12 knots to allow her crew to inspect the damage. When 3 more torpedo tracks were spotted to port, the ship immediately accelerated to full speed and turned to starboard. The torpedoes exploded in the cruiser's wake. The hit caused minor flooding and minimal damage, but her watertight bulkheads held. The Germans spotted Salmon and briefly engaged her with Nürnberg's rearmost main battery turret, but to no effect. Nürnberg thereafter got under way at a speed of 18 knots and made for port. While en route back to Germany, on the 14th of December, Nürnberg and Leipzig, which had also been torpedoed by the Salmon, came under further British attacks. The Royal Air Force, or RAF, launched a attack against Nürnberg and Leipzig, which had been damaged by Salmon. Approximately 20 Vickers Wellington bombers from the 99th Squadron were intercepted by fighters from the second group of JG-77 fighter wing under the leadership of Karl Alfred Schirmert in the vicinity of the Speckbrück and Wangerooge. The RAF bombers failed to further damage the cruisers, as JG-77 pilots claimed 7 and 1 probable bomber shot down, including one claimed by Herbert Karcher. RAF records indicate that 6 bombers were lost in the attack. The submarine HMS Ursula also unsuccessfully attacked the damaged cruiser that day, just before she entered the Kiel Canal at Buspel. After arriving in Kiel, Nürnberg went to dry dock at the Duchy Werke for repairs, which lasted until April of 1940. In early June of 1940, Nürnberg's commander, Captain Jure C. Otto Kolber, was informed that the ship would not participate in Operation Juno, a sortie by the battleships Gneisenau and Scharnhorst. Instead, she was transferred to Norway, departing Kiel on the 10th of June under the escort of the torpedo boats Falke and Jaguar. On the 12th of June, the torpedo boats were sent to Stavridge for fuel. In the meantime, Nürnberg steamed a zigzag course at 27 knots to evade any submarines that might be in the area. The following day, the 2nd Minesweeper Flotilla took over her escort duty off at Kemperhelm. On the 17th of June, Nürnberg reached Harwich, which was to be her base for the next month. During this period, one of her Admiral AR-196 floatplanes unsuccessfully attacked a British submarine. This was the only action the ship saw while in Norway. On the 25th of July, Nürnberg and several destroyers and torpedo boats escorted the damaged battleship Gneisenau, which had been torpedoed by a British submarine, from Tremperhelm, Norway, to Kiel. The flotilla arrived in Kiel on the 28th of July. On the 8th of August, Leo Karchert replaced Colbert as the ship's commander. Nürnberg spent the rest of the year in the Baltic. The Italian Admiral Medjevich, or Medjevani, visited the ship while she was in Gotehaven in September. A short refit was conducted at Duchy Werke in October and November. On the 15th of February 1941, she was reclassified as a training cruiser and assigned to the Fleet Training Squadron, along with other surviving light cruisers. These ships were tasked with training the crews of the U-boat arm, which was expanding rapidly to wage the Battle of the Atlantic. At the start of this period, many of her crewmen were themselves transferred to the U-boat fleet. After the outbreak of war with the Soviet Union in June of 1941, Nürnberg was reassigned to the Baltic Fleet, which was centered on the new battleship Tirpitz. After it became clear that the Soviet Baltic Fleet did not intend to sortie, the German ships were dispersed. Nürnberg returned to her training duties for the remainder of the year. Another refit was conducted in January 1942. During this period, her aircraft equipment and aft torpedo tubes were removed, and her light anti-aircraft armament was increased. Allied air raids caused some damage, which delayed her return to service until the 23rd of August. She thereafter conducted sea trials until October after which she was deployed to Norway. On the 11th of November, Nürnberg left Götahaven, bound for Trondheim. She arrived there on the 18th of November and remained there until she was transferred to Bogen Bay outside Narvik on the 2nd of December. There, she joined the fleet in being, which was again centered on the Tirpitz. Nürnberg saw no action during this period. On the 27th of April, 1943, Nürnberg left Narvik for German waters via Trondheim. After arriving in Kiel on the 3rd of May, she had her machinery overhauled. After the work was completed in late May, she was assigned to the training squadron in the Baltic. Frequent crew changes kept the ship at a very low state of readiness. She remained in this duty through 1944, and she saw no action. She was not assigned to the swarm bombardment units that supported the retreating German army in the Eastern Front, unlike most of the other ships of the training squadron. At the start of 1945, she was assigned to minelaying duty in the Startnort, which was based in Oslo, Norway. She completed only one minelaying operation, Operation Titus, on the 13th of January. The forces assigned to the operation included 2 destroyers, 2 torpedo boats, and a mine layer. Nürnberg herself carried 130 mines. Severe fuel shortages prevented any further operations. On the 24th of January, she steamed to Copenhagen, where she remained until the end of the war, as she had only 270 long tons of synthetic fuel oil aboard. On the 5th of May, 1945, she received the ceasefire order, and on the 22nd of May, the British cruisers HMS Dorsetshire and HMS Ditto arrived to take over Nürnberg. On the 24th, Nürnberg and the heavy cruiser Prinz Eugen sailed from the Copenhagen under escort by Dorsetshire, Ditto, and several other warships. The flotilla arrived in Wilhelmshaven on the 28th of May, and the German vessels remained there while their fates were determined at the Potsdam Conference. The Allies eventually decided to award Nürnberg to the Soviet Union to prevent the Germans from scuttling their ships as they had done in 1919. The Allies formally seized the vessels on the 19th of December, while Nürnberg was in dry dock. That day, the ship's Soviet crew came aboard. On the 2nd of January, the Soviets took their seized warships, which also included the target ship Henson's radio control vessel Blitz, the destroyer Z-15 or Erich Steenberg, and the torpedo boats T-33 and T-107 to Libya, to present-day Latvia. The Soviet Navy examined the ship in great detail after she arrived in Libya. The ship was then renamed the Admiral Makarov and assigned to the 8th Fleet, based in Tallinn. And later in 1948, she became the flagship of the 8th Fleet, under the command of Vice Admiral F.V. Soviel. In the early 1950s, 3 new Chapayev-class cruisers entered service, which prompted the Soviet Navy to withdraw the Admiral Makarov from frontline duties. She returned to her old job as a training cruiser, this time based in Kronstadt, in mid-1945. During this period, most of her light anti-aircraft armament was removed, and new radars were installed. Her ultimate fate was unclear. What had been reported was that she was placed out of service by May of 1959, and was scrapped sometime thereafter, reportedly by mid-1960. Nevertheless, she was the longest surviving major warship of the Kriegsmarine, and the only one to see active service after the end of the war. And that concludes today's video. If you guys did enjoy it, please do go hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell, as well as hit the like button and leave a comment down below if you have any questions, concerns, or requests. Something that I would like to disclose here at the end of the video is that while I tried to do the best research that I can in many aspects, I can't always get the, I don't always, either say, stuff right, nor do I manage to get, some of the stuff that I say during these videos correct. I'm pretty sure I mixed some stuff up in this video, but after rewatching it, replaying it through and through, I couldn't find anything. So again, I apologize if you guys did. Another thing to keep in mind is that I am no historian. Yes, I truly do enjoy history and all matters. I enjoy talking about history and giving a look at naval history, especially for the people who do watch my videos. So I do apologize if I do get anything wrong or such like that. Again, I'm not a naval historian, although I am working to become one, but at this current time, I do not have that rank in a matter. So, as well as the gameplay or images that you see on screen, I know I used, especially during this video, I used a lot of other images from different warships or different items. You can actually especially see this in whenever I was showing the anti-aircraft guns or talking about the bullnose bows or the torpedo bulges. So, I do apologize for that. Again, I try my best during each video. If you guys are interested in helping me with any of these videos, or supporting and helping me to make these videos better than what I'm already making them, I have created a Patreon, which you guys can find linked down in the description if you guys want to go check that out. I'd be greatly appreciated if you guys did. Or you guys can come join the Discord, which you guys will have full reign of, even if you are not a Patreon. Either way, if you guys wish to come and help me with any of these videos, you can do so by joining either one of those, or putting requests, helpful comments, or stuff like that down in the comment section. But with that being said, again, I thank everybody for tuning in. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and I shall see you guys in the next video. Peace out.